This is Breighlynn Polk interviewing
Lolethia Underdue.
for the HBCU Radio Preservation Project. It is currently 11:06 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on Friday, July 12th, 2024. This interview is being recorded in the Ferris Newton Hall, located at North Carolina Central University in Durham, North Carolina. Can you first start off by again telling me your full name and your relationship to WNCU?
So my name is Lolethia Underdue, and I am the it's kind of a weird kind of a title, but I am the AudioNet General Manager, but I'm also referred to as AudioNet's advisor. So because I work for the Mass Comm Department and WNCU kinda, so.
And can you just tell us what AudioNet is to in relationship to WNCU?
So AudioNet is WNCU's sister station. So it's basically a student station where it's a learning laboratory, and so students get an opportunity to get their feet wet, learn a little bit about radio, and get experience hands-on, just hosting shows and creating content for radio.
Thank you for the explanation. So before we get into your involvement in radio, first we want to kind of get an overview of who you are prior to you coming into radio, specifically at WNCU. So can you tell me when, if you are comfortable, and where you were born and about the people who raised you?
Okay, so I was born in 1973. I know, super long ago. I was born in Roanoke Rapids, North Carolina. So it's a rural area right across the North Carolina border from Virginia, but it's in North Carolina. People always think Roanoke, Virginia. No, Roanoke Rapids, North Carolina. Very small town. It's very rural, so lots of farmland, and basically all the jobs there are kind of, service type jobs or teaching.
Thank you for that. And what was your community like growing up in Roanoke? You said Rapids? Roanoke
Roanoke
Rapids.
Rapids. So it was basically with my family. They're very insular, so I spent a lot of time with family and not a whole lot of time outside of family. So you talk to people and they're like, oh, I was in school and I played basketball, I did track, and I was in a band. No, I didn't really do any of those things. I think my ninth grade year I was in the band class, and I actually played with the band at graduation, and that was my one time doing something outside of like my family circle that we were usually in.
So it seems like your community was mostly like family. Was it a big family that you came from, or?
So, a huge family. My father is the second out of 13 kids, and my mom, while her family wasn't that big from her standpoint, it was just 5 kids, but her mother was the oldest of 10. So, like, I had this huge amount of aunts and uncles. I was literally grown before I learned everybody's name. So, yes, we had a huge family.
Thank you. And did you have any siblings, or?
So I have one sibling. My sister Tiffany is 14 years younger than me, and she lives with me. So it's still that family thing that we have going on.
Absolutely. Now, do you mind me asking your parents' names?
Sure, Leon and Joyce Underdue.
Gotcha. Now, as far as your parents, what did they do for work?
So my mom is a file clerk at Lowe's, and my father is retired, but he was a line worker at CDC, Consolidated Diesel Company. Basically, his background was automotive mechanics, and so he didn't want to work in the shop getting all dirty, so he went to this factory that created engines for 18-wheeler trucks.
Gotcha. So you said that your community was mostly comprised of your family members. How was that for you, just being around family?
For the most part, it was pretty cool. Like on my grandmother's street, literally, if I go to her street right now, everybody on her street just about are the people that I grew up with. So even though they might not directly be closely related to us, most of them are distant cousins. So you always played with your cousins, and so that was just how it was.
And was the demographic more mixed, or was it like predominantly African American?
So, from my family's standpoint, of course, predominantly African American, but my high school was African American and Native American with some white people, but the majority of us were either Black or Native American.
Gotcha. And how was the I guess, did y'all get along as far as like being?
So, yeah, there was a lot of like people just hanging out with each other. I will say the white kids were a little bit more insular. Like they had their own little place that they kind of hung out with separate from everyone else. But with the students that were Native American and Black, we did a lot of intermixing and doing things together.
So when it comes to your family unit, was music something that was kind of like at the center of your family, or what type of activities did you all do to kind of, connect with each other?
Well, we did a lot of church. My grandmother was the mother of her church, and one of my father's grandmothers was a minister at a holiness church, very, very conservative church. We did not go to her church, but there was a lot of religious music in our being. But my father was not particularly religious. So my mother would go to church like clockwork every first and second Sunday and take me. But my father generally stayed home. But in our house, he always had a nice console stereo, and he had music playing on that all the time. So we listened to at home, we listened to a lot of R&B and funk. That was basically what we listened to at home. And when we went to church, we got the gospel. But because it was also a small town, we also listened to the local radio station in the mornings, mainly to get school menus or to find out if school was canceled or something. But that was a top 40 station. So you heard a lot of pop and stuff like that, too.
What was your favorite genre of music coming up?
I think growing up, I didn't really have a favorite until about the 4th or 5th grade when I discovered hip hop. I was like, this is really cool. And my father was like, that mess doesn't sound good. I was like, no, Dad, this is really cool. And so every now and then he'd give me a little money to go to the record store and buy some stuff, And so I'd bring home some music. And I think at one time I brought home the Fat Boys, and he was like, But then I might have brought home like some Prince, and he's like, okay, thumbs up, So it was a lot of fun to kind of do those things.
And sometimes with the transitions of music, people like to stick to what they know rather than like venturing off to new genres. So
yes,
hopefully you're able to kind of help him gain a liking to a little bit of the music.
Not really, but he did like Common, The Light. Remember that? And he liked Eric Sermon, Just Like Music. Like those two I specifically remember he was a big fan of. And I think he liked Rob Bass, It Takes Two. But I can't think of any other hip-hop songs that he was really like, oh, that was good music.
Yeah, probably because it sampled some of the music that he was familiar with too.
And so the samples also made him angry. He was like, oh, they're just stealing from James Brown. So that's what he mainly thought about hip-hop.
That makes sense. So you said that you weren't really involved too much in organizations and clubs in high school, but can you tell me the name of the high school you attended?
So I went to Northwest Halifax, and I was involved in the yearbook club and the school, was it a school newspaper? I think we did do some articles. And I was on like the Quiz Bowl team one time there too.
Okay, so it seems like you were a studious student. Like, was it studies more of your thing that you kind of paid attention to outside of?
Oh, I had no choice. My father was not playing with me. Yes. Studious.
Absolutely. Did you have a favorite subject while you were in school?
I really like history, and biology was my absolute favorite. And I really thought that when I left high school, I would go on to college to become a doctor or something at a later point in my life. But that didn't happen.
So, but you finished high school, and then
yes.
What was your next plan once you finished?
Okay, so this is where it's kind of funny. So I was finishing up high school, and I had already been accepted to North Carolina A&T State University in their laboratory animal science program, and I had a small scholarship to attend. Well, one day I was ducking class, and the hall monitor was out. So my friend that I was ducking class with, she said, hey, there's a meeting for Elizabeth City State University and students who are interested in going. Let's go there so we don't get in trouble. So I went. And I was like, okay. And they had a scholarship that we could apply for. So I applied for the scholarship and, applied for admission, all of that stuff, and just kind of forgot about it. Well, a few weeks later, I got a letter in the mail saying that I had gotten a scholarship, even though I had not gotten my admissions letter yet. And then the admissions letter came. And so I was like, oh, but I'm going to A&T. I'm not going to Elizabeth City State. And my father talked me into going to Elizabeth City State. Mainly, I think, because his younger brother went there. So he felt like I'd have someone to watch out for me. And because of the scholarship, he wouldn't have to really shell out any money. So he talked me into going there. But years later, I said something to my mom about it. And she said, listen, I told you to go where you want to go. I handle the money. So when I said you could go to A&T, you could go to A&T. And I was like, oh, man.
So you made the decision to attend Elizabeth City State University?
Yes, I did. And I don't regret it at all. I had a fantastic time at Elizabeth City State University.
So how far was Elizabeth City State University from Roanoke Rapids?
So it was about an hour and a half from Roanoke Rapids. And at that time, because I was from a small rural town, I just assumed that all colleges were in large cities. So even when I went to Elizabeth City State University, I didn't have a car. So I just assumed it was a larger city, like a metro area, until one of my friends who had a car, we started riding around. It was like, oh, this is just like home.
Was that difficult for you to adjust, or were you having like higher expectations?
I think I spent more time than I should have, like, not appreciating Elizabeth City State University the first couple of years because it was small and because I wanted to go somewhere larger and do something different. And it wasn't until like I started like messing up my grades and getting kicked off my scholarship that I changed my attitude actually about it, because now I'm paying for it. Can't transfer anywhere else with bad grades or you'll start all over again. And so it's like, okay, let me take this thing seriously. And that's what I did. And I really enjoyed it once I changed my mindset about what I was doing and why I was there.
So were you always with the major that you originally started with, or did that change over time as well?
I was a biology major when I got to Elizabeth City State University. And somewhere along my sophomore year, I realized I was not willing to put in the time to learn the math that I needed to learn in order to be a good biology major and later on a doctor. I didn't want to do the tutoring. I just wanted to not have to admit that I had things that I needed to work on. And so I started looking around like, okay, well, biology's not going to work. What can I do? And in the meantime, I was working for the school yearbook, and I had been trying to get on at the student radio station. Well, not the student radio station. It was the radio station there. And so I had been working on getting into the radio station. And I finally got on at the radio station, and I realized this was something that I was not the best at, but that I was pretty good at doing. And so I said, well, you know what? I'm going to stop with the biology and switch over to English news media, because we didn't even have a mass comm major at that point. And so that is how I got involved with that.
Now, did you find that you were more satisfied doing, the English and you said media?
Mm-hmm. So I hated all the English classes. I think I liked African American lit, but everything else I was kind of like, it's okay, but this is what I need to do to get to where I want to go. And they did have some news media related classes. And so I was able to get some experience with that. And I also took advantage of the opportunity. So outside of working for our campus radio station, I volunteered at our campus newspaper. We didn't have a television station at the time, so I volunteered in the public relations office on campus. We had a video conference center. I volunteered over there. So I was very passionate about being successful, because Edith Thorpe, who was our general manager, made it clear to us that you needed to have a full skill set and not just be so focused on just being an on-air personality, but to really branch out and learn as much as you can about everything in media. And I took it to heart.
Yeah, and it seems like Edith Thorpe is a name that is constantly being thrown around as we do these interviews. So it shows that she had a big impact on the careers of, people who we're talking to within the radio broadcasting field. So
Yes.
it's good to know that you got to get some of that mentorship from her. So tell me about how you got your start into radio. You say that it's something that you were wanting to do. So how was that transition into that?
Okay,
role?
so this is how it all really started. You're about to get the lowdown. Okay, my friends and I would sit around and listen to our radio station and hear other students on air, and we go, we could do that. We could do that better than them, you know. So we started like just dropping by the radio station, like, hey, Mrs. Thorpe, we'd like to work for you. And she's like, no, come back later, you know. And so we decided that we were going to just be really persistent, but not creepy persistent, but just really persistent. So we started, me and my other girlfriend, Taburica, we started just kind of stopping by maybe once a month, like, hey, we're still interested. Don't forget about us, you know. And so we kept doing that. And so about 6 months later, she called us up. It was like during the summer, I think. And she said, okay, if you guys still are interested, come on. And so that is how we literally got our start, by being like little bugaboos.
So how did that feel, being that it was like a goal that you had to get on the radio, and then finally, after being so persistent, getting that opportunity?
You know, I don't really remember because it's been like 30 years. I just remembered like, oh, she's not going to tell me no. I'm going to keep coming back until she says yes. And so I think I remember kind of being satisfied about that. But once I actually got on air and recorded myself that first time, I was like, oh, no, I sound terrible, you know. And so I really hated it. And one of the other guys that worked at the station was like, no, DL, you sound good. You sound good. I was like, I don't know. I hear what you're saying, but I don't know about this. But I kept at it.
Well, good. It's nice to see you have that spirit of persistence, despite, you know, you're not having it excel when you thought you did first going in. So what was the training process for you, like stepping into that role in radio as a student?
So Edith had a training process for us. So we actually went through like a 1-week training where we learned a lot about the history of radio, about our particular radio station, about FCC rules and regulations. So she really stressed to us how important it was for us to be our best selves and to be professional while we were there, because it was not just some kiddie thing that we were doing. This was, you know, real life consequences for us making mistakes.
Now, was there any type of cross-referencing that you took from your class work into the radio, or was it strictly your training within the radio station is how you kind of got acclimated to it?
Yes, it was strictly my training within the radio station, because our news media program really focused on written word more so than broadcasting. And so that was the outlet for broadcast and your opportunity to learn about broadcast with the radio station.
So at that time of you coming into the radio, what was kind of like the formatting of how the programs work?
So at WRVS back then, we had gospel in the mornings from like 6 a.m. to, I guess, 8 or 10. I can't remember. It's been so long. And then after that, we had R&B from whatever time that was until about 7 at night. At 7 at night, the hip-hop shows came on. And then at 10 at night, we had our Quiet Storm, slow music, slow jam. So we had a mixture. On the weekends, it was a mixture of gospel and R&B. And then on Sundays in the evening, we'd have like a couple of jazz programs.
And how often were you able to be on air?
So initially, I started out on Sundays. I think my first show, I played a couple of hours of jazz, and I didn't know anything about jazz whatsoever, because that's not something that, you know, my parents played growing up. And so I would literally just pull out albums and look at covers and just decide to play music based on covers, and then just randomly choosing like the names of tracks that I like, oh, that's a cool name, let's play that, you know. And so that was my jazz experience. And then we had a taped jazz program that I had to start, and I would like break the tape every week for weeks on end. And the guy that came on after me, he would kind of make some snide comments about me breaking the tape, but I don't know why I couldn't get it. It was a reel-to-reel tape, and I could not get the threading of that thing right, and I broke the tape a lot.
Gotcha. Now, was there a particular time that you were able to be on air? Was it like once a week, or?
So initially it was once a week, but because I was particularly passionate, when opportunities came up, I think I wound up doing the hip hop show Monday, Wednesday, Fridays. I eventually took over the reggae show there on Saturdays. And I left the jazz show way behind, And I was really trying to get on Quiet Storm after I had done hip hop for a while, but they pigeonholed me. They said, "Nah, you're hip hop."
Yeah, hip hop, and then you said you had a love for hip hop too. So
Yes.
that's probably why.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, was the student population kind of receptive to the radio station?
Oh, absolutely. So, I was doing my radio show, and I also started doing news with Miss Kimberly Pierce Cartwright, who was our news and public affairs director. And so for the news, I needed a name that was more professional than DL. I needed to have something else. So I made up a name, Deidre Lassiter, because that fits DL. And I literally had people walking up to me talking about, "I didn't know your name was Deidre." And like, we went to high school together, some of these people. I'm like, "Get out of my face. You know my name. Go away." Yeah. But they were very receptive. So you got a lot of feedback from people about how good you were doing, or how you could do a lot better, rather.
So how many years as a student were you involved at WRVS?
So from 93 until 96 when I graduated. So I was gone about a year, and Edith called me up and asked me to come back and serve as the interim assistant program director. And so I came back about a year and a couple of months after I graduated and started working as the interim assistant program director.
Now, how was that transition from being a student on air personality into that new role?
It was interesting because a lot of the students that were there were students that I was, friends with, and so I remember Edith and I having discussions about how to kind of handle stuff, because we didn't want me to be Miss Underdue, and I really didn't want to be Miss Underdue. That felt kind of weird with people that you literally just were hanging out with last month, and so basically, we kind of just took it incrementally, just working on, like, me becoming a little bit more authoritative as the months and weeks went on.
And what were some of your duties in that role?
So in that role, I served as the assistant program director, which at that time was really like the music director's position. So I listened to a lot of the music, made sure that, updated music was in for the students. And when they were doing their shows, I hosted a show as well in the afternoons, I think from like 2 to 4, maybe, something like that.
Okay. Now, being in that role, did you kind of get your own, perception of what HBCU radio was?
Oh, absolutely. Just being there, because Edith's ethos was, that we really needed to be there for our community, African Americans. And so our programming needed to kind of reflect things that would be positive for African Americans. And so not every song would get approved at our station, because some of it was, as the kids would say now, way too ratchet, And so we were very conscious. We had really nice modules that ran on air that told people about job opportunities, or just things like a lot of inspirational things to kind of help people in their day-to-day lives, or even to inspire them to be more aspirational, if you will.
And I know that the motto and the mission for WRVS is our community voice. So is that something that you all, strive to continue to do?
I felt like that's what we did while we were there. We wanted to be a voice for not just the campus, but also for the community at large.
And so how long did you stay in that role at WRVS?
So I was interim assistant for about 2 years because they put up an advertisement for the program director, and I didn't get it. And I was a little upset about that. And so an opportunity came up in student affairs, and I actually left and went to student affairs. And I was over there about 2 years. And in the meantime, the person that had taken on that program director's position left. And I talked to Edith about it, and she brought me back on as the program director over there. It was also an interim position, and I did that until she left, and I was actually hired for the position because she left about I don't think it was a year after I came on board. And so the person that replaced her did eventually hire me in that position, but I don't think he wanted to hire me for that position, but he couldn't tell me no.
Yeah. And so how did some of those roles as the program director differ from the previous role you had at the station?
So a lot more authority fell on my plate. I wound up being on call 5 days a week, which I was at in the other position too, but on call 5 days a week and rotating weekends with the rest of the professional staff. And so I started scheduling students to actually do shows, hiring students, especially after Edith left. So all the things that she really was very hands-on about actually started to fall into my lap as far as it related to like the on-air performance of the students, which it should as the program director. And so I spent a lot of time recruiting students and training students and monitoring their on-air performances, making sure they were following the rules and things like that.
How long were you in that role for?
I was there from 2000 until 2004.
Okay. So what type of imprint do you believe that you left there as the program director?
I think that while I was there, I was able to really inspire a lot of students and just help them understand that you can do this. If this is what you really want to do, this is what you can do. So I don't know that I made a specific impression that stayed with the station forever, but I do think that I helped inspire some of the students that were there to reach for the things that they really wanted to do.
Gotcha. So you were there up until 2004. What came next after WRVS?
So after WRVS, I got a call while I was at WRVS from Edith, and she told me she had a position opening here that she thought I would be a good fit for, and it was for the general manager of AudioNet, the student radio station here at North Carolina Central University. And I was really ready for a change at that point. I had been at RVS, for most of my professional career, other than like a brief stint at a commercial station in Winston-Salem when I lived there right after graduation. So during that was basically the only experience outside of RVS I had. So I was ready to try some other things. Also, I was a little annoyed with what I was being paid at WRVS because I had gone on to Norfolk State University and gotten a master's in media management, but my pay did not reflect the level of education I had. And so I was really ready to go somewhere else. And the opportunity here would lead me to more money, and I would still be doing what I was interested in, which is radio. So I said, I'll apply, and I was able to get that position here.
How was it hard for you to adjust going from being a program director into going to a role with the AudioNet?
So it's basically the same role, I would say, because AudioNet doesn't have a full staff. I am the only staff member here. So really is more program director. A lot of the paperwork and stuff I'm able to channel through WNCU when I need to get stuff done for that. So I don't feel like I'm a general manager in that sense of like I really take on all the office part of it. I'm still basically focused on the performance part of running the station, and I enjoy it. But I will say when I got here, some of the students were kind of side-eyeing me. They were like, we don't know about this lady. And they were, they were trying to be mean to me. And, I will say, as much as I love Elizabeth City, the kids there were tougher than the kids that were here. And so I'd say within about 6 months, they were all like, oh, DL, we love you, and I was like, yeah, I know, I got y'all.
So what type of qualities or things from your experience at WRVS did you bring to the role at AudioNet?
So just being able to, use like trade magazines and stuff like that to figure out what I should be playing for the students, and just knowing how to kind of talk to them on a level that they can understand. So instead of me always being like a parental figure, that's not really my goal with them. I don't want to be their best friends either. I tell them all the time, like, don't call me after work if it's not about work. Don't call me like, hey, DL, what are you doing? No, I'm not your friend like that. But I bring that level of energy here where I'm going, okay, this is what you want to do. This is what you need to do to get there, because that's what Edith gave us. She told us the things that we needed to do to be successful in this career field if we wanted to stay in it. So I try to bring that to my students here as well.
And what type of expectations do you have from your students coming into that program?
The main thing I want from them is consistency. And I stress that a lot. Don't tell me you want to work Monday through Friday from 3 to 7 p.m. I don't need you to come in Monday through Friday from 3 to 7 p.m. because you are going to, at some point during the semester, stop coming. So I need you to commit to at least one day a week that you know that you'll be here. And no matter what's going on, homecoming or whatever, which they still call out, but commit to that one day and put in your best effort, do your research for your show, put together your ideas, and then we go from there.
So AudioNet is a student station.
It is a student station.
Go ahead. No, I'm sorry.
And I really kind of let them choose what they want to do with their time on the station. I don't try to give it a particular sound. I want you to explore what your ideas are about radio. And I mean, I'll give them feedback, so I'll tell them oh, you're talking too fast, or you need to, work on not saying so much, or we work with the on-air performance part, but I encourage them to be as creative as they want to be with producing their content.
And is that a part of the mass communications discipline?
Mm-hmm.
So they have to be within that field in order to work for AudioNet, or do you allow outside students to come in and work?
So mass comm students get first priority. And when I first got here, they were very, very interested. And so the majority of our staff were mass comm majors. Now I have a few students, and even then I had a few students that were not mass comm majors, but the ones that I have now, because radio has shifted, and so they're not as passionate and as interested in radio now as they were 20 years ago. And so they're very much interested in podcasting now. So how I get around it is I generally tell them, why don't we record your podcast live on AudioNet doing a show, and we can record it, and you can put it on whatever content repository you want to put it on afterwards. So that's how I kind of handle it, and they go, oh, okay, yeah, same thing, because a podcast is just a radio show that you record and put on Spotify or something so people can access it.
So what are some interesting things that you have seen from students within the AudioNet program as far as their creativity?
So I had a student, and I thought it was the coolest thing. He did a poetry show. So on his show, he would read poems. He would invite people in who wrote their own poems, and they would literally read their poems on air. So I thought that was really cool. I had another young lady who liked to do I forgot the name of the show, but the concept was she would play a song, and then she would play the other songs that were sampled in the hip hop piece. She would play the original compositions, whether they were jazz or R&B or whatever, for the listener. So I thought that was pretty cool too. And we've had some good talk shows. So I had a student named Uwe who did not go on the radio, and she had a talk show, and her show was probably the most popular show I've ever heard here on campus. And I really almost told her not to do her show because it broke all the radio rules. So they were I don't know, she'd have 10 or 15 people in the studio with her. Everybody's talking at once. I would listen and go, what in the world are they talking about? What's going on? Well, everybody would say, oh, we were listening to Uwe's show. We love Uwe's show. So that's when I realized the generations were changing, and I was not keeping up with what's going on. So I let her keep doing her show. And so that was probably the most talked about, most popular show that we've had. And it literally did not sound anything like any radio program I'd ever heard before.
So is that common that you are finding some students are coming in with ideas that kind of go against what traditional radio may have? Or the idea of traditional radio?
So not really. So most of them are just kind of okay, we want to do a radio show. How do I do the show? So most of them are looking for guidance. They want me to tell them how to do it, and I want them to explore their creativity. So it's so we'll start them off with okay, well, this is how you do a basic show. This is, if you're an announcer, that you announce what just played, and you might tell them a little bit about what's going on campus. Don't forget tonight in the gym, this is happening, blah, blah, blah. So I'll start them off like that, but I encourage them that if they have other ideas to explore them.
So how can students hear AudioNet? How is that kind of producing to the student population?
So students can listen online at nccuaudionet.org. So they can just type that in on their phones and they can hear it that way, or on their laptops. We are on channel 3-4, but we were down for a little while after this cyber attack. And I just haven't started it back up because I need to pay for some programs that will let us finish out that broadcast. And since it's the summer and there's not very many kids here, I decided just to wait till the fall to start it up again. But once we start it up again, it will be on 3-4.
And it is
local campus TV.
Gotcha. Now, are there any opportunities for students from AudioNet to kind of cross into WNCU station?
So absolutely. WNCU is always looking for kids, and they really like it when they've come through my production classes or when they've come through AudioNet, because they don't have to teach them as much. So they do like when I can funnel students their way. And I really have to remind students that you're going for the experience, because a lot of times they go, I don't really like jazz. And it's like, that's not the point. It doesn't matter what you like. You need to learn how this stuff works so that you can use it in other functions in your life, whether you decide to do podcasting or pursue broadcasting on radio yourself.
Absolutely. And yeah, I was just going to ask, like, how do students kind of react to the fact that WNCU is a majority jazz station?
Yeah, they get a little, like, I don't know if it's intimidation or just kind of closed-minded, because, you know, now with our phones being so accessible to all of these different like streaming apps, you can really just tailor your taste, and you don't really have to listen outside of what you like. And so that, I think that makes them a little bit more closed-minded to other genres of music sometimes.
Absolutely. Now, you've been working in HBCU radio for pretty much your whole career. Do you find that anything has changed since you started at WRVS and then coming here to WNCU?
So absolutely, automation is a thing now. Yay. I mean, and just everything being digital. I remember learning to physically cut tape. Like if I had a song come in, I remember we had Outkast. What was the song? Hootie Hoo, I think, right? And so I'm in there and I am editing this tape, and it takes me like 2 days because I'm a student too, you know. So when I get some time away, I come in and I do some editing, and then I come back later and do some more editing to it. So it took about 3 days. Excuse me. It took about 3 days to get this tape edited for this Outkast song, and then I played it back and I listened to it. I said, ugh, that's a lot of edits. Edith is probably going to say no. So I brought her in to listen to it, and Edith said, no, it's too many edits. Not that I didn't do a good job with it, but just that it had more edits than she thought would sound good on radio. So it got kicked to the curb, and I was like, man, that was a lot of work for nothing.
Absolutely. So now you're saying automation is a thing, so it makes that process much easier.
Yeah, well, automation makes it easier in that, like, back when I was doing the program director thing, if a student didn't show up, I had to find somebody else or I had to fill in myself. And so with automation, you know, it can just run music and you don't literally have to have a live person there. But back to the editing, it's all digital now. So what took me 3 days to kind of do back then, I could probably do in about an hour at the most, you know. And so it's just such a time saver, and it's so much easier because you can just shoot it over to the computer that you want it to go to, and then it's in the system and you can air it. So yes, it has changed a lot. Like, we don't have cart tapes anymore. We don't have DAT tapes. Tapes are gone. So everything is digital, and I do enjoy that.
Absolutely. Now, as far as you say you've been in HBCU radio for for all of your career. Do you find that what differences do you find between HBCU radio and commercial radio? Even if you haven't been involved in commercial radio,
Well, I did a brief stint in commercial radio. I was not an on-air person there, but I worked briefly at the station. I would say the main thing is, like, with both stations, you're kind of consumed with finding funding for the station to keep it going. But I think that with us being educational stations, we care a little bit more about the listener and what we're trying to convey to the listener. And we want to, you know, include programming that we hope will better their lives in some sort of way, or just educate them or be more aspirational. And with commercial radio, they don't really have those constraints. So, they can play literally anything, and to the detriment sometimes of the listener, but that's what people want to listen to right now. And so they have no problem kind of serving it up. And I mean, and in general, not to be too lofty, I mean, we do play a lot of that same stuff on AudioNet because it's the student station and that's what they want to hear. But, we try to encourage them to like branch out and listen and check out other things too.
Yeah, and I was just going to ask, I know that with AudioNet is probably more of a student-based audience, but when it comes to WNCU, how would you kind of describe the audience that you all are looking to serve?
So with WNCU, our audience is, of course, a lot more mature than AudioNet's audience. So we're looking for people in our community. We're looking for people who really appreciate jazz, that want to know more about jazz, and especially like with Dr. Holly's show. He's a jazz professor. He's a professor in the jazz studies department here at North Carolina Central University. And, he really provides like a lot of information about jazz and the artist, like way more than I could ever provide, because I'm not a musician. I'm an announcer, And so, but, I run into people all the time that tell me how phenomenal it is and how much they love that they are basically learning like in class listening to his show.
It's a good, and it kind of speaks to that educational component of this being at a HBCU as well. So how do you kind of find that balance? Because I know that you are on-air personality as well with WNCU. So how do you kind of find that balance between appealing to students, but then also like with WNCU appealing to that mature audience?
So I find that what's easiest for me is to stay off air at AudioNet. Like that is not what, and you might hear a tag or something with my voice on it, but in general, I stay off. That is for students, and I push them to be the voices of that station. So that keeps me from like having to switch gears so much. Like, oh, I'm doing hip hop, so I got to sound this way. Now I'm doing jazz and I need to sound this way, So it's a lot easier for me mentally if I just stick with my programming over at the jazz station, which I also do reggae there too. I don't know if I mentioned that too.
Okay, so yeah, so can you kind of describe how you kind of go about your shows on WNCU?
So generally what I do is when I get there, because the computer will generate a playlist for us. So generally what I do when I do the jazz show is I go through my playlist when I get there and look for things that I do not like. And they get tossed out immediately and replaced with things that I think are a little bit better. I check the timing so that stuff is ending when I want it to end. And so I take a little time like tightening up the playlist. But I find that the computer is really good to use because it's more eclectic in my opinion than I am. I think I kind of get stuck playing some of the same artists all the time, whereas the computer is constantly kind of introducing different artists or different songs that maybe I would not have tried. But I oftentimes like preview stuff like, wait a minute, what is this? Oh, okay. All right, I'll play it, So that's how I approach the jazz shows. With my reggae shows, I generally don't play anything that's on the playlist that pops up for my reggae show because I put in a lot of that music anyway. And that's really for the days that I can't be here and I just want to have something playing while I'm gone. But when I'm live, I bring in all of my CDs or a lot of my CDs. I also have some stuff stored on a different computer in the station that I'll play from as well with newer reggae music. And a lot of times I just go with the vibes. So I'll just start off with a Bob Marley and a Peter Tosh. And then from there, wherever it takes me, that's where I go.
And which one do you find you like to kind of be on air for the best? What's your favorite
So
one?
I am most passionate about my reggae show.
Your reggae show?
Yes.
And what are the names of your shows?
So the reggae show is The Reggae Scene, and my jazz show is Afternoon Jazz.
Gotcha. And do they air every day of the week? Or?
So Monday through Friday for the jazz show from 3 to 7 p.m. and the reggae show from 2 to 4 every Sunday.
Thank you.
Yes.
I know. Is it available to listen to online as well?
Absolutely. You can listen online at WNCU.org. You can download our mobile app. Just visit the App Store or the Google Play Store and search for WNCU.
Thank you. And I'll be sure to make sure I do that as well.
Yes.
Thank you. So I know that you said you were at WRVS as well as WNCU. Can you kind of speak to what makes those stations personally important or special to you?
Absolutely. I think, what makes WRVS so personal for me is that is where I learned radio from the ground up. So just like growing up there and cutting my teeth there to becoming an adult and leading the station in some aspects, I think that is what makes it special for me. Even now, like WRVS's program director was one of my students when I was at Elizabeth City State University, Clay Mercer. Melba, who's the general manager, was the assistant general manager when I was at Elizabeth City State University for the TV station there. And so she eventually worked her way up into being the manager for both the television station and the radio station. I'm trying to think. Miss Sheila Lee, who's there, she was my gospel person when I was there. I think Edith brought her on like in the mid-90s or something like that, and she's been there ever since. So just, it's that one's special to me because it feels like home. And then WNCU is special because like this is where I've been for the last 20 years, and so this also feels like home. Like, I mean, a lot of the staff has retired and kind of moved on since I've gotten here, but still a lot of people are still involved that were involved the first day that I got here. So literally our general manager Lakeisha has been here since I got here, and so it just feels like home, I would say. Kimberly Pierce Cartwright was our news and public affairs director here too. She retired in January, but I worked with her at RVS and here at WNCU, so it was comfortable a little bit to come here.
And what does it mean for you to be a part of that HBCU radio station culture within the realms of WRVS as well as WNCU?
So I love HBCUs so much. I went to 3 of them, and I worked for a 4th one, and probably will work at another one if a great opportunity came up. And so just being a part of HBCU radio is exciting for me as well because there's not a whole lot of us. And we get the opportunity sometimes to really reach an audience that is overlooked. And so it's exciting to just be a part of the tradition here at WNCU and at WRVS. And so I just love it.
And you mentioned you went to 3 HBCUs so far. I know about Elizabeth City State University. What other schools?
Norfolk State University, which is in Norfolk, Virginia. And I briefly went to A&T when I was working on my master's, but I left because of the opportunity to go back and work at WRVS. And so from there, I transferred, which I didn't really transfer because nothing transferred over, but I transferred to Norfolk State University and finished up my master's over there.
Okay, so nice to see that you are an avid HBCU supporter, whether it's through education, working, or just being a supporter.
Yes, I love them. My mother put that in me. So just back to my family upbringing briefly, my father was always adamant that I go to college, but my mother was adamant that I go to an HBCU.
Did she attend an HBCU?
No, she didn't get to go to college at all. Neither of my parents, they went to community college, but they didn't get a chance to go to a 4-year university. And so they were, very... what's the word? They really wanted me to go to an HBCU, not an HBCU, but to college. But my mother in particular wanted me to go to an HBCU because she felt it was important that we support these schools because, 100 years ago, we couldn't go to any school we wanted to. And so some people decided that it was important that we have a chance to get an education and we should support those institutions that were there for us before all these other opportunities arose. So, and I believe in that. Like sometimes I get chills just looking around this campus and the other HBCU campuses because, somebody had a dream and they decided to put it in action and make a place for us that we could be safe and that we could grow and learn. So I love it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was a beautiful testimony. I'm the same way about HBCU culture.
Yes.
I love my HBCU and all the other ones around it.
I know that's right.
So I know that you all have a TV station here.
Yes.
With AudioNet, is there any opportunities for students to also kind of cross into the television realm, or is it just strictly radio?
So for us, it's strictly radio, but a lot of our students also work with the TV studio or with Central News, which is a internet-based newscast, and they do some recording in the TV studio over there. But most of our students do cross-pollinate, so to speak. They'll have time here and time over in the television studio, but we don't necessarily overlap like that. But I'm very friendly with the TV studio staff, and so with my classes, like I have broadcast announcing in the fall, so we'll probably go visit the television studio and have them read off the teleprompter and stuff like that in the fall. So we want them to have those cross-pollination opportunities.
Absolutely. It kind of speaks to like the mass communication. You can be well-rounded in everything. So when you get out there, you have all the competencies to fit into a job description if you're going out to the job field.
Absolutely.
Now, are there any type of political or like issues that you allow your students to kind of put into their shows, or do you kind of stray away from those issues?
So I like for them to talk about things that are important, but I have to remind them that, you can't tell people who to vote for.
Right.
So you can, talk about the candidates and their, pros and cons, but don't tell people who to vote for. That's something that they need to decide for themselves.
And what about any community issues, maybe if it like negatively or positively impacts the community that you are serving?
So they don't do a lot of talking about the Durham community, but campus issues come up quite often. And so I remind them that you can't just say, repeat anything you just heard. So you need to make sure that you can back up what you're saying with facts. So you can say that I don't like the food in the calf. You can't sit around and say that the calf has roaches and rats if you haven't seen the roaches and rats yourself, So we talk about what you can and cannot say in terms of like not crossing the line into like slander.
It kind of gives them that voice for their community as well. Mm-hmm. Now, you were here during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yes.
How did that kind of impact AudioNet since maybe students weren't here on campus physically?
Yes. So initially when everybody had to go home, basically we were just shut down. When we came back in the fall, it was complicated because not very many students were back at the time because there were still a lot of online classes. So not everybody chose to come back because you could literally just stay home and take classes. So I had about 3 kids working for me during COVID. And, it was not our best hour. It was kind of like sad because it was so quiet, and I'm used to it kind of being vibrant and alive during the fall and spring semester. Summers, because I don't really work in the summers, we don't really have a lot of activity in here, but during the spring and fall, it's usually, kind of lively, if not all day, some periods of the day, and it was not like that with COVID. So it was a very hard year. That whole 2020 year was pretty hard into 2021.
Was it hard for you to get back into the groove after when students started coming back on campus?
So no, I was so happy. A lot of people say, "Oh, I want to work from home." I learned I never want to work from home. I absolutely hated it. I need interaction and I need people. And so I was excited, even though we were doing classes hybrid. So I would have days that we did classes online and then days that they would come in and do the laboratory portions like recording themselves. Because recording at home, that's not really cutting it. I need you to come in here and manually like touch stuff and get a feel for how to do this. And so, yes, I was very excited. And I think they were too. It was kind of going back to normal.
And you definitely need that hands-on experience and working in radio.
Absolutely.
To learn the equipment, be on air with your voice, and also have that guidance.
Right. You need all of that. And it's really hard to give that when I'm listening to a recording you did on your cell phone and maybe the washing machine is going in the background and somebody yells or something, you try to go in a closet to get a better sound. But it's so much better just to be in a space designed for radio broadcasting.
And so what are some other challenges outside of environmental or like health-wise that you find you have experienced, whether it be at WNCU or with AudioNet?
Um, well, some of the challenges are just, kid stuff, like young people stuff. Like they're going through a lot. It could be financial. I remember crying because I had a student that was really passionate about being here and being in radio, but her mother would not sign the loan papers for her to come to school. And so she was trying to get emancipated so that she could be independent. And I don't know what happened with that, but that was a kid that never came back, And so we deal with things like that. Those are always like challenges when you have students that maybe something's going on in their personal life. I literally had a student, not at AudioNet, this was in one of my classes, that was in an abusive relationship. And so she was, being beaten by her boyfriend and the father of her child, so we do have like real life challenges that happen here outside of what we do on air.
Yeah, and it's good that you are compassionate enough to, offer that support to them, because not everybody gets that either at home or whenever they're not in class. So thank you for that. Now, what type of opportunities do you believe that HBCU radio stations afford Black employees and students that maybe commercial radios may not afford them?
I think for us, we have the patience for you to make mistakes. You can make a mistake here at AudioNet. You can make a lot of mistakes here at AudioNet. I'm not going to walk in a room and scream at you or curse at you or tell you you're fired. We'll work on it. We'll try to get you, to a better space and place. So I think that that's what we can offer. Even at WNCU, where it's more strict because we're definitely broadcasting on air, there's still opportunities there if you make a mistake that people are not necessarily going to flip out and, threaten to fire you. Like, you don't have to feel like you're walking on eggshells here all the time. There's support here to help you grow. Several of my students have been able to go to WNCU. Al Dawson, who is the operations manager, started out as a student at AudioNet, and he was able to get his feet wet and eventually move on and become their operations manager at WNCU. Jay Simone, who's there on Tuesdays and Thursdays right now from 8 to 10 p.m., she was one of my students in my classes, and she was supposed to be interning at AudioNet, but that was the semester that we broke everything down to get ready for this renovation. So I didn't have anything for her to do on air because we hadn't built the new temporary studio yet. So her and her classmates, I just had them record some stuff. And then luckily she was working with WNCU for their fundraiser, and she was talking to the program director. He liked her. He got her to record an air check, and they hired her. So she's on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 8 to 10 p.m. So I'm hopeful that some of our other students, and we've had some over the years that come and go that have had part-time opportunities at WNCU. So I'm hopeful that that will continue.
Absolutely. I'm pretty sure that it will. We got to interview J. Simone for the project.
Yes.
So pretty sure she kind of speaks to that process as well in her interview. Now, why do you feel that projects like this is the HBCU Radio Preservation Project, why do you feel that this type of initiative is important to the culture of HBCU radios?
So I just firmly believe, just like our institutions are important, the actual universities, like what's there at the institutions are worthy of archiving and preserving so that people know what it has to offer and what's there for them. And also because, as I mentioned before, the medium is changing and people are moving away from radio. I don't think it's going to die anytime soon. I mean, it's not like in 5 years we're going to look up like, hey, what happened to radio? But, 50 years from now, 100 years from now, I don't know. But we need to document this. People need to know that it was here, that it served a purpose, and that going forward, that you can still continue to grow outside of HBCU. Why can't I get it out today? HBCU radio. And just because you're here, it doesn't mean that this is what you always have to do. So many of our students have branched out and done so many things, but they get their work ethic here. They learn about radio and about how to be, I don't want to say a hustler, but how to be a go-getter and go after your dreams. So it's important that other people understand that you can do this.
Absolutely. So I know you mentioned some names of your mentors that you came up with. You said Miss Thorpe, Miss Cartwright, and you can mention anyone else who had helped you mentor you.
Oh
But
my gosh, there were so many. So, Mr. Ben Fagan, who used to be at Clark Atlanta, he was our program director for a while at WRVS, and so he pushed us really hard. There's Talbert Gray, who was the general manager at Elizabeth City State when I left. He was phenomenal. He tried to get me more money, but he couldn't get it. The HR department was just like no, and so. But he was phenomenal. Like when he came in, I really just, meshed with him well. I liked his ideas. I liked his energy, and yeah, so Talbert Gray, I talked to him, it's been a little while ago now, but he invited me up for a Christmas party in Atlanta. Well, I should say down for a Christmas party in Atlanta, but I just didn't make it down there. But I was like, that's pretty cool,
yeah, actually, I got to interview Mr. Gray.
No, get out of here.
Yeah, about maybe 2-3 weeks ago. And like you said, his energy is very infectious.
Yes.
Even as an elder, as he's getting older, he still answers the phone with that radio voice. So, yeah. I mean, how important is mentorship in this type of field in HBCU radio?
Oh, I think it's really important because you need someone to tell you that you can do it. And a lot of times we don't necessarily get that feedback. Especially with your friends. Your friends might give you positive feedback, but then they'll also tell you you're dumb or something. You know how your friendships are, But when you get into your mentoring, this is someone who's done what you want to do or someone who has done some of what you want to do. And they look at you and they tell you like, okay, you can do this. These are the skills you have. Here's maybe something you can work on. Hey, I know someone over here. I'm going to mention your name to them. So if there's an opportunity, maybe they'll look out for you because a lot of this is about networking and knowing people and them knowing your work and being able to speak up for you and encourage other people to bring you on.
Absolutely. So in the spirit of that, for people who are coming after you, students or future students who have an interest in radio broadcasting, what type of knowledge or advice would you give to them?
My advice would be what I did, which is to learn something about everything that you can find out about in this field because you don't know where your first opportunity will come. Maybe your first opportunity will be in podcasting and content creation, but what if it isn't? If you never ever took the time to learn about anything else in the field, then how can you take advantage of opportunities when they come your way? So it's important for you to be actively involved in every aspect of this mass communications field because you might get an internship. Like every year, we have a partnership with Duke University, and we have the Charmaine McKissick Melton internship that we do over at Duke. And so they work there for the summer, and they get paid to work there. And so shout out to Dr. Charmaine McKissick Melton. While she was not one of my radio mentors, she was one of my mentors here in the Mass Comm department. For a while, she was our chair, and she used to work in radio as well. And so she's one of those go-getters, go out there and make it happen. And she really instilled that in our students as well. So it's important to have all of that while you're out here.
And it's good to have those connections, even if it isn't at a HBCU, at other institutions. You can, outsource some of the resources that you may not have at your institution.
Absolutely, yes.
Well, yeah, so we're getting closer to the end.
Okay.
So is there anything that was not mentioned in this interview that you want to bring up or anyone that you want to shout out that maybe you didn't?
I'm trying to think of anyone to shout out that I didn't mention. I think I got everybody because I mentioned Clay. Yeah, I'm thinking, and so I've worked with some fantastic people in this field. And so if I did not remember to say your name, please charge it to my head and not my heart because I've been very blessed to work with some wonderful people in radio.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again, Dia, for agreeing to participate in this interview, even if it was short notice. Like I said, your name has been constantly brought up, whether we were Elizabeth City talking to people or here, that you were someone we needed to kind of get in contact with for this, to make sure that we have a complete profile of not only WRVS, but as well as WNCU.
Yes. And so I love that you guys are doing this project, and I look forward to hearing it, not seeing it, but hearing it at some point in the future. And I also want to thank you guys for doing this. It never occurred to me that it should be done, but when I heard it, I was like, absolutely, I'm on board. I love talking about HBCUs and about these institutions within the institution that are here to serve the community.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again for your participation.
Thank you.
Of course.